The lights of the studio gleamed like polished diamonds, reflecting off the glass table that separated Meghan Markle and Hoda Kotb. The morning show theme played cheerfully, and the audience clapped with infectious enthusiasm. Meghan stepped onto the stage, her posture tall and graceful, a picture of calm control. Her elegant beige dress shimmered under the lights, and she smiled warmly as Hoda rose to greet her. Cameras panned to capture the moment. Two women, both icons in their own right, meeting for what the world expected to be a lighthearted, easy conversation. But as Meghan settled into her seat, something felt different. The applause faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. Hoda's trademark smile was there, but her eyes, sharp, investigative, carried a weight Meghan hadn't expected. "It's so good to have you back, Meghan," Hoda said brightly, but her voice had a certain precision to it, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Meghan returned the greeting with equal charm, laughing politely. "It's good to be here, Hoda," she replied. Yet inside, a quiet unease began to stir. The first few minutes were harmless enough. Talk about California, motherhood, and her latest charity initiatives. Meghan's answers were polished, confident, delivered with the grace of someone used to public scrutiny. The audience nodded, smiling, sipping their morning coffee, unaware that beneath the calm surface, a storm was brewing. Every time Meghan spoke, Hoda tilted her head slightly, listening intently, her fingers resting near her cue cards. It was subtle, but Meghan noticed Hoda wasn't just listening. She was studying. At one point, Hoda leaned forward and asked, "You seem really at peace these days, Meghan. After everything that's happened, do you feel you've found your place?" It was a gentle question on the surface, but Meghan could sense the undertone. "Absolutely," she replied smoothly. "Peace is something you build, not something you find." The audience applauded again, and Hoda smiled, though this time it didn't reach her eyes. The energy in the room shifted slightly. The invisible line between conversation and confrontation had been drawn, though neither woman had crossed it yet. As the cameras rolled on, the small talk continued. But it felt heavier now. Hoda mentioned Meghan's work with women's empowerment and the challenges of balancing public life with privacy. Meghan responded thoughtfully, though each question seemed to edge closer to something more personal. The kind of question that could crack the mask of composure she wore so carefully. The lighting felt warmer. The room felt smaller. Meghan's fingers resting on her lap, tensed ever so slightly. Between segments, the director's voice buzzed through the earpieces. 2 minutes till next cue." Meghan took a sip of water, her eyes flicking toward the crew, then back to Hoda. "Everything okay?" Hoda asked softly. Meghan smiled, the kind of smile that hides every emotion behind a wall of grace. "Of course," she replied. But her instincts whispered otherwise. She'd done hundreds of interviews before, some supportive, some brutal, and she recognized the signs. The tone of voice that got a little too careful, the glint in the interviewer's eyes that hinted at something waiting beneath the surface. When the cameras turned back on, the energy felt different. Hoda's questions were framed with warmth but dipped in quiet precision. "It must be hard," she began, "to live with the constant attention, especially after everything with the palace." Meghan nodded, keeping her expression soft, though her pulse quickened. "I focus on the positive," she said. "On growth, on family, on things that matter." Another round of applause followed. Hoda smiled again in that practiced media-perfect smile, and moved on. But the air in the room was no longer friendly. In the audience, whispers began to stir. Something about the rhythm of the exchange had shifted. The laughter that once came easily now sounded forced. Meghan's eyes occasionally darted toward the camera, the faintest flicker of discomfort appearing before she quickly masked it with charm. Hoda, meanwhile, leaned back, her calm demeanor never faltering. She was waiting for the right moment, the moment when the real interview would begin. By the time the first commercial break ended, the tension was almost visible. Meghan adjusted her posture, crossing her legs, her jaw tightening slightly. Hoda straightened her papers, her eyes locked on Meghan like a chess player studying her opponent's next move. The show's cheery energy had dulled into something sharper, quieter, heavier. The audience could feel it, even if they didn't yet understand why. Then, as the camera light blinked red again, Hoda smiled wider than before and said, "All right, Meghan. Let's talk about something the world's been curious about." The crowd murmured, sensing the shift. Meghan inhaled quietly, her pulse steady but her guard rising. The warmth of the morning show had vanished. The soft chatter, the polite laughter, the easy rhythm, all gone. What remained was a silence charged with anticipation. Meghan met Hoda's gaze, her smile still intact, but her eyes sharper now, cautious. Somewhere deep down she knew. This wasn't going to be the conversation she expected. This was going to be a test, one that would play out live, in front of millions, with no script, no filter, and no escape. And though no one in the studio could say it aloud, everyone could feel it. The calm before the storm was about to end. The second segment began innocently enough. The cheerful studio lights bathed everything in gold, the crowd still buzzing from the earlier laughter. Meghan adjusted her microphone and smiled as Hoda Kotb leaned in with another warm question about her charity projects and upcoming ventures. It all seemed harmless, almost too harmless. Meghan answered confidently, her words calm and measured, her smile perfectly rehearsed. Yet deep down, she sensed the rhythm had changed. Hoda's tone, once light and conversational, now carried a quiet weight. There was a subtle shift, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air turns thick and expectant. Then it happened. Hoda's next question landed like a stone in still water. "Meghan," she began softly, "you've spoken before about your experience in the royal family, about how difficult it became toward the end. I have to ask, do you regret the way things ended?" For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. The crowd went silent. The hum of the studio lights became audible. Meghan blinked slowly, her expression unchanged, but her eyes told a different story. The question had been inevitable, but hearing it spoken aloud, live on air, still felt like a punch to the chest. She knew this moment would come, but not so soon, not here, not like this. Her smile faltered just slightly, barely noticeable to the casual viewer, but the cameras caught everything. Meghan's fingers tightened around her mug. "Regret," she echoed softly, her voice steady but lower than before. "That's a complicated word." The audience held their breath. Hoda leaned forward, eyes locked on Meghan, waiting. The silence between them stretched longer than anyone expected. Finally, Meghan continued, "I think when you make choices that protect your family, there can't really be regret. Only lessons." It was a graceful answer, diplomatic, polished, safe. But Hoda wasn't satisfied. "Of course," she said with a small nod. "But some might say that the way everything played out caused a lot of pain for others too." "Do you ever think about that?" The audience stirred uneasily. Meghan's eyes flicked toward the cameras, then back to Hoda. Her voice remained calm, but there was a new edge in it now. "Pain is part of truth," she replied. "And sometimes telling your truth means someone else has to face theirs." A murmur rippled through the crowd. It was bold, measured but bold. Hoda's polite smile didn't fade, but her next words came sharper, cutting through the air. "But you understand why some people feel you've profited from that truth, right? The interviews, the documentaries, the book." She let the sentence hang in the air, unfinished, its implication heavy. Meghan's jaw tightened. For a moment, she didn't answer. Her hand brushed against the mic cord as if grounding herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. "I've told my story because others tried to tell it for me. And when you've been silent for too long, you learn the cost of staying quiet." The room was silent again, save for the faint sound of someone clearing their throat in the audience. Hoda nodded thoughtfully, her tone still polite but unmistakably pressing. "So no regrets at all?" she asked one final time, her voice light but her eyes unrelenting. Meghan's smile vanished completely. "I regret trusting people who didn't deserve it," she said flatly. The audience gasped, a wave of whispers rippling through the studio. Even Hoda's expression flickered, just for a second. This wasn't the composed Duchess the public was used to seeing. This was Meghan unfiltered, stripped of the royal grace and perfectly measured words. Hoda leaned back slightly, studying her guest. "That's quite an answer," she said, trying to steer the tone back to calm, but the damage was done. The energy in the room had shifted. Cameras zoomed in on Meghan's face, capturing every flicker of emotion, the slight quiver in her lip, the tightening of her jaw, the unmistakable glint in her eyes. Meghan took a deep breath, glancing briefly at the audience before turning back to Hoda. "People like to talk about endings," she said, her tone cool now. "But for me, it wasn't an ending. It was the start of finally being heard. The audience burst into scattered applause, unsure whether to cheer or stay silent. Hoda smiled politely, but the tension between them was palpable. The show's cheerful energy had dissolved completely. The warmth was gone. What remained was raw, charged, and unpredictable. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged quick glances. They could feel it too. The interview had just turned into something much bigger than planned. The control, the easy laughter, the rehearsed answers, all of it had fallen away. What was left was the spark of confrontation, the dangerous honesty that no PR team could script. Hoda shifted in her chair, her professional smile frozen in place. "Well," she said, trying to lighten the moment, "you certainly know how to make headlines." Meghan tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but cutting. "Headlines have never been my goal, Hoda. Truth has." It was subtle, yet in that moment, the power in the room shifted completely. The Duchess, once under the microscope, now held control. But as the segment faded to a commercial break, Hoda's expression hardened just a little. This wasn't over. The question had been asked, the spark had been lit, and though the cameras cut away, everyone knew what was coming next. The storm hadn't fully broken yet, but it was on its way. The tension in the studio had become unbearable. What began as a cordial morning conversation now felt like a high-stakes interrogation broadcast to millions. Meghan sat upright, her posture still perfect, but her eyes betrayed her calm facade. She was fighting to stay composed, to maintain the poise the world expected from her. Hoda Kotb, sitting across from her, sensed the shift and pressed harder. The crowd leaned forward, hanging on to every word. Hoda's tone was polite but cold, each question sharper than the last. "You say you wanted freedom," she began, her words measured. "But many believe you traded one kind of spotlight for another. Was it really freedom you wanted, or control?" The question lingered in the air like smoke. Meghan inhaled deeply before answering, her voice even but edged with frustration. "Freedom isn't about escaping attention," she replied. "It's about choosing what kind of attention you accept. I chose honesty over performance." The audience murmured quietly, unsure if they were witnessing an interview or a confrontation, but Hoda didn't blink. "Honesty?" she repeated, tilting her head. "Some would argue your version of honesty has hurt people who couldn't defend themselves." Her voice was calm, too calm, the kind that cuts without raising volume. Meghan's jaw tightened. "Telling the truth shouldn't hurt anyone unless there's something they don't want heard," she said. Her tone was still measured, but her words carried weight. A few audience members clapped softly, though the atmosphere remained heavy. The tension crackled like static in the air. Then Hoda did something unexpected. She reached down to her cue cards and read aloud, "You once said silence is a betrayal. So Meghan, if silence is betrayal, what does it mean when your truth betrays someone else?" The words hit like a thunderclap. The room went completely still. Even the camera crew seemed frozen. Meghan blinked, stunned, her composure cracking for the first time. The quote, "twisted and turned," had been weaponized. She stared at Hoda, the corners of her mouth twitching as if fighting back the storm brewing inside her. "That's not what I meant," Meghan said finally, her voice low but sharp. "You're twisting my truth." The moment the words left her mouth, the audience gasped. Some whispered, others looked at each other in disbelief. The Duchess of Sussex, composed, graceful, always measured, had just snapped. Hoda leaned back, feigning surprise, though her expression carried a glint of victory. "I'm just quoting your own words," she said softly, her smile tight. Meghan leaned slightly forward, eyes blazing now. "Words without context are just weapons, Hoda," she said, her voice steady but charged. "And I think you know exactly what you're doing." The air inside the studio shifted again. The easy rhythm of morning television had vanished completely. The crew exchanged anxious glances behind the cameras, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. But this was television gold. Meghan's breathing was controlled but heavy. "I came here to talk about my work, about helping people," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "Not to be cornered into defending my life all over again." Hoda didn't respond immediately. Instead, she gave a small, knowing nod. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "defending your life is your work." That line landed like a final blow. Meghan's eyes darkened, her lips tightening as she looked away for a moment, gathering herself. Then she turned back, her voice cold now. Then maybe it's time people start defending their own instead of attacking mine. The crowd didn't know how to react. Some applauded nervously. Others simply stared, wide-eyed. The studio had turned into a battlefield of words. One fought not with volume, but with precision and restraint. Hoda crossed her legs slowly, her demeanor calm, as if she hadn't just triggered one of the most explosive live moments of her career. Meghan, meanwhile, sat silently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her calm was gone. The warmth in her eyes had been replaced with controlled fury. For a long, tense moment, neither woman spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the lights and the faint rustle of camera movement. The audience could feel it. Something irreversible had just happened. Then quietly, Meghan said, "You wanted real answers. Now you have them." Her tone was final, almost icy. The control had shifted. She wasn't the interviewee anymore. She was reclaiming her own narrative, even if it meant burning the bridge in front of millions. The red light on the main camera flickered as it zoomed in, capturing every detail of Meghan's expression, the determination, the anger, the heartbreak hidden beneath. Hoda gave a small, professional smile, pretending composure, but the damage was done. The chemistry, the control, the illusion of friendliness, all gone. What was left was a raw, unfiltered confrontation that would dominate headlines for weeks. In that moment, the morning show had transformed. It wasn't just another celebrity interview. It was a clash of wills, a collision between truth and perception, image and reality. And as Meghan sat there, unflinching, the world watched history being made, one unedited second at a time. The studio fell into a suffocating silence. Not a single person moved. The air felt frozen as the last echo of Meghan's voice faded into the bright lights above. Hoda sat motionless, her calm expression betraying nothing. Meghan's jaw tightened as she reached for the microphone clipped to her dress and carefully pulled it off. The small gesture carried the weight of a thunderstorm. "I thought this was a conversation, not an interrogation," she said, her tone cold but trembling at the edges. The words hung in the air like smoke, visible, heavy, impossible to ignore. A few audience members exchanged uneasy glances. Others sat frozen, not daring to blink. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the quiet collapse of what was supposed to be a friendly morning show. Meghan turned to leave. The sound of her heels striking the studio floor echoed like gunshots. Hoda didn't follow. She simply sat back in her chair, her eyes sharp, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment, it wasn't clear who had won, the host who stood her ground, or the guest who refused to be cornered. The instant Meghan disappeared backstage, the audience erupted. Some clapped in support, others whispered in disbelief, their voices overlapping in a storm of confusion and excitement. Producers rushed in, their earpieces buzzing with panic as the live feed cut abruptly to a commercial break. But the real show had just begun. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation spread online like wildfire. Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube were flooded with posts titled, "Meghan Markle destroyed Live on Air," and Hoda Kotb exposes the Duchess. Millions watched and rewatched the moment she stood up. The look in her eyes, the defiance in her voice. By the end of the day, the clip had gone viral worldwide. News outlets dissected every word, every glance, every pause. Some praised Meghan for standing up for herself. Others claimed she had finally met her match. Hoda remained silent, refusing to comment, which only fueled the mystery even more. What was meant to be a light-hearted interview had turned into one of the most shocking, unforgettable moments in morning television history. And as the world debated who was right and who was wrong, one thing was undeniable. That morning, live on air, Meghan Markle's calm royal image had shattered before millions of watching eyes.